Welcome everyone from the Vision business community. Today I have a personal friend of mine, a specialist in change management, and his aim is to change the behavior of everyone in the world. Welcome to this show, Craig Ball. How are you?
Good, George. Thanks, mate. And hi, everyone out there. Quite a privilege to get interviewed today. And look, if I could just add to your very nice introduction, and we've worked together. We've worked together on a number of projects over the years, and you always give me the best introductions, as bar none. The only thing I'd really want to add to that is, look, yes, I am on a bit of a mission to help transform mental health, but specifically right now, I'm focusing on the men's mental health space. But
Yes.
in my consulting work with my various clients, I do not discriminate, obviously, but I do the change management piece as part of project services, but I also have resilience training. But in terms of my online offerings and things like that, at this stage, I'm focusing on men's mental health, and certainly in terms of my seminars to the general public.
Yeah, well, it just so happens that, at this stage, we're all for gender equality, but we haven't reached that in the business world. It really is dominated by a lot of men, and a lot of men who, fail to communicate, kind of like, actually, I should tell our listeners that, you do come from a military background. You're in the Special Forces, well, SAS. No, not the SAS, Commandos. My mistake.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Commandos. And one thing that blokes do suffer from is not really opening up and communicating, authentically. And it leads to a whole host of problems. And I think right now, Craig, you've probably seen, how has COVID-19 affected some of your clients and your work with clients?
Well, typically, I mean, you can see I'm in my home office at the moment. I'm working from home a lot more, which is fine. My client group hasn't been too badly affected. And in fact, I work a lot in the rail industry with blue collar people as well. A lot of those people are frontline people, so they're showing up to work no matter what. So what can you provide from them? How can you help them? I haven't seen it. Look, I've been extraordinarily lucky in my business because I'm contracted out for quite a substantial amount of time, and it's fair enough for someone who might be struggling and dealing with that right now to say, well, it's easy enough for you. Yeah, that's common, but that's just how the cards have fallen on this occasion. So I don't think that's necessarily a valid comment, but it is a common thought that people may be having, because let's be realistic. I practice what I preach, and I'm going to delve into that as we go. But all it would mean differently for me I would be accessing whatever's available to me and practicing what I preach a little bit harder, perhaps, than I normally do. So it hasn't been easy on anyone, but we are getting through it. And I think that if there's one thing that I think everybody needs to be prepared to consider, is optimism. And I'm not talking about, a lot of people jump to conclusions and they'll go, oh, look, I can't be positive all the time and jumping up and down. That's not what it is. It's being able to, no matter how badly, look at things and how difficult your situation has become, and being able to go, well, something good has to come out of this, no matter what. And if you take that mindset that something good can always come out of this, and always look to the upside as opposed to the difficulty. Now, look, your initial reactions, I'm not talking about those. That's your raw emotion. But if you can start looking and focusing on, or start, the fact, one of the best pieces of communication, the best videos I've ever come across, and I suggest everybody goes and look it up after this, is Jocko Willink, Willink, I believe it is. Look up Jocko Willink Good. It will. If you don't believe in optimism after that, man, it's only 2 minutes, and it's because if you can say good in the face of the most, what you might call devastating or difficult circumstances, it means that you can, if you're alive, it means you're still alive, you can still re-engage and get out there and get after it. And at the end of the day, all it means is that our focus has shifted, however tough that might be financially. So reach out and talk is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, look, it's a human condition, isn't it? That when they're faced with a threat, they either go into fight, flight, faint, freeze, or what's the other one? Fawn. Fawn, yeah.
I haven't heard that before.
I learned that the other day, but
Oh, how delightful.
but but what's important to recognize is that all those are base emotions. They come from the croc brain. They're disconnected whatsoever from our rational thinking, and can prevent us from coming up with imaginative solutions to what we consider to be the threat.
Very
So
true. And speaking of rational alternatives to things, one of the biggest mistakes that just about everybody makes.
tell
So
us.
if you don't think you're making it, you may be making it, is to blame our emotional upset or our emotional state. If you're quite self-improvement oriented, our emotional situation, we tend to blame it on external events that occur.
Yep.
And that's an indication that most people are just bad philosophers. Their philosophy on life and what occurs to them can be externally motivated. Now, I'm not going to say that external forces aren't a contributing factor to pretty much everything. They are. However, in life, what is most important is what you can actually control. And all you can control, particularly in difficult, adverse circumstances, is your responses to things. Sometimes you feel like you can't. But if you just fade back to what you can, your response is everything. And it's not what happens to you. So if you look at the cognitive psych, and I do a lot of work in the cognitive psychology space, particularly with my workshops and seminars, it all comes from one quote. And that quote is basically, it's not the situations that upset us, but it's the meaning we assign to them. And we're assigning some people out there are assigning some pretty desperate meaning to what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, all that's happened is your beliefs have been triggered. Your preferences in life, you'd prefer things go the way you want them to. That's been triggered in such a way, with such pressure, that it's become an absolute belief that this mustn't happen. It becomes a demand in terms of your thinking. And that's what actually leads to your emotional consequence. It's like A, B, C. You've got adversity, your beliefs get triggered, and it leads to a consequence. As simple as that. And I can forward you some material on this if as a handout to people afterwards. So what you need to start doing is start figuring out which of these beliefs. Now, these are known as irrational beliefs, and some of you may be experiencing a feeling that you would say your normal, calm, regular self thinks it's quite irrational. These are irrational times. Okay, let's be realistic if you want to judge it by people's responses. And irrational beliefs come in three types, nice and easy. Three things to remember. And they're beliefs about yourself, they're beliefs about other people, and they're also beliefs about the circumstance. Now, right now, you've probably got some crazy stuff going on in the circumstance. You know, how could this happen? You might be blaming the government or other outside forces for this. However, if we go back and remember that all we can control is how we respond, and I think it's important to call out early that this is not about blaming anybody or anything, because all blaming does is reinforces a negative belief and it reinforces a negative stereotype. Because if you blame this as terrible, horrible, and awful, that's all it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. If you blame it as or call it out on the extreme end of the spectrum of negativity, you're not going to be able to bring it back, because that's an end state. Okay, saying this is the worst thing ever, whilst that isn't actually true, is an end state, and it's really hard to wind that back. So rephrasing your language to this is, it's obviously less than preferable, or not what I preferred. Now, I'm not trying to cheapen your experience here. I'm trying to give you some tools to pull this back into irrational boundaries so that then you can start understanding it for what it is and start challenging your own thinking around this, because it's widely known that we think as we feel. Okay, the more you can work with your thoughts, the more you can influence your feelings, and you will start to get a better view of this. Now, if you personally are starting to feel like a failure for this, which once again is not true because it's completely out of your control, if you're starting to feel that way, then you need to stop overgeneralizing. We often make this mistake. It's a great error of thinking, and stop overgeneralizing between yourself and your achievements or lack thereof. Okay, your failures and your achievements do not make you. Okay, who you are is a worthwhile, fallible human being. Everything you have to pull yourself out of this, everything you have is within you. You are capable, and most importantly, you are enough to get through this and to come out the other end stronger if you choose to. It's about stepping up to the plate and making a choice. Okay.
So what makes people? I mean, I know this might be difficult to answer, but what makes people so different that there's so many who catastrophize and will curl up in a ball and cry for their mother. That's being extreme. Or they'll be frozen into inaction, and then others get energized by the same set of circumstances and create marvelous change and marvelous results, and in business, pivot their business and change so quickly and take advantage of the situation. What makes the difference, in your opinion?
Conditioning can come down to it a lot. Your upbringing can be huge. If your real role models growing up freaked out at everything, you're likely to freak out at stuff. And it doesn't need to be all of your conditioning as a child. I mean, as an adult, you may have had that as a child, you may have had that stuff going on, but as an adult, you may have looked to and admired role models who just took it in their stride and were able to cruise through. So you may be seeking what they would be doing right now. If they're all of a sudden freaking out, maybe they're not the best role models, but it's often conditioning. And one of a friend of mine is a psychologist, said to me, the reason why people like me sit around all day, she said, and ask, ponder your childhood, because often your responses are directly attributed to how you may have behaved as a child. And it's easy to go back to. It's a comfort space. We often go into these comfort zones when things happen to give us, how the hell do we get through it anyway,
Well, if you're beset by that kind of pattern that's been with you since childhood, how does one break the chain, so to speak?
Start by deciding today you're going to do it differently. Start by deciding that the past, and I know it sounds very self-improvement-y, but this is where we probably need it. The past does not equal the present or the future for that matter. It does if you choose to let it, but today, moving forward, you can make a complete turnaround in who you are and what you're prepared to do. Now, if you're prepared to do whatever it takes, start doing whatever it takes, not what you've always done if your thought patterns aren't helping. Start asking, what can I do to get out of this? Ask a better quality of question is what you really need to start thinking about, but also drawing a line in the sand of behavior and understanding you are enough. You can get through this and be like many businesses who are thriving in these conditions.
Well, we talk about, I mean, you make it sound so easy, Craig, but what if you're in an environment that just feeds that old pattern, that old paradigm? You're surrounded by people who are also panic merchants. You're surrounded by your family stresses and panics as well. It's easy to say, make a decision, but does environment have a lot to do with it too?
Yeah, but you can influence your environment. So if your family is freaking out, call a family meeting, sit them all down and tell them to please wait till I've finished talking on this. I need to call this out for the next 20 minutes. Here's how we are going to fight through this. And I want to know how many of you are in on this. One of the most powerful things that a business can ever do is develop a team charter. There's some other people call it like a code, if you like, code of honor type thing. Develop a team charter today for dealing with crisis and how you're going to behave and call each other out when they're not behaving to that standard. And the group will unite and bind together and do this. There's heaps of resources out there. I think Blair Singer's got some of the best stuff, but have a real good, deep look in about how you're going to choose to lead through this. It's a great opportunity for people to start stepping up as leaders. It really is.
Yeah, and that does lead on to the next question. Like, you obviously are encouraging business owners to involve their team, and not only lead, but also allow their team to feed ideas and possibly, work towards solutions for current situation. How would you, if you were to coach a business owner, what would you, what are the kind of things you'd look at doing for their staff?
Okay, well, first of all, and I'm really glad you asked that question. First of all, some of the businesses that I interact with on a daily basis, especially working from home, my local coffee shop, we all got somewhere like that we go. They've laid off people or they've significantly reduced people's hours, all right? You're going to sit down and have a planning meeting and bring your team in, bring in everybody, even the people who you've had to lay off, because it'll give them some hope that when all this, as the decisions that are going to be made and as the fight is going to be taken to this situation to fight back, that gives them some hope that they're going to have something to come back to as well. Okay, a lot of these best decisions are, look, as the business leader, you also have to coach your staff. So think about the questions you can ask to encourage them. How would they suggest you get out of it? And give them some space to come up with some solutions as well. And actually, one of the biggest mistakes all businesses make when they get that feedback or they get those decisions is not to act on them. Okay, act on some of them, and where you can't act on them, brief everybody and explain why you didn't act on them or how they may have influenced you in another way. You've really got to be open, honest, and share with everybody, because cutting out the communication loop or cutting people out of that communications is a great way to lose them, and you will lose them if you don't engage and be open and honest. And ask yourself, ask yourself those questions. Am I doing this to the best of my ability? Can I do this better? Ask how. You will come up with the answers.
Well, this is more of a general question, Craig, but what have you observed during the COVID-19 crisis? I mean, that in itself is an issue for me, that everyone's labelled it a crisis. But during this period where we've been in shutdown, what have you have observed, the good and the bad and the ugly?
Some funny things. My main client that I work with, we've all gone home except for frontline people, and I've had to go into their place of work a couple of times, and I've got some meetings coming up there as well, and it's like a ghost town. So that's one of the interesting things. Obviously the roads are pretty quiet and the petrol's gone down, so that's a good thing. But I've also noticed, you've got your X marked on the floor in pretty much every physical business you go to, and if you almost bump into people, some people couldn't care less and some people freak out. It's been a really interesting space, and I had a joke with my barista the other day about the police. They might be out there fining people for all kinds of things, but they were all standing around in a really tight group, and I waited till they left, and I was ordering my coffee, and I said, "Oh, no social distancing going on there, is there, Fern?" And he goes, "I think they think it's all a bit funny." So look, you can buy into it. At the reality of the day, there's statistics to support either view you look at. So, and it becomes quite political, and I really do my best to divorce myself from that, except for joking with mates. But your fears probably feel real right now, and I'm not going to discredit them in any way, but you do need to start working towards pulling yourself out of the negativity and starting to breathe a bit.
Well, on that note, how would someone be able to do that in a structured and meaningful way? I mean, it's one thing to like contemplate your navel and say, look, I need to change the way I've been thinking. It's another thing to try and find the tools that actually can effectively apply that kind of thinking. So
yeah, very true.
Tell us how people can get onto changing possibly the way they view things.
Okay, first of all, you can still exercise. That's probably the most important, empowering thing about all of this. You can still exercise. It doesn't matter what shape you're in. Go for a walk, but find somewhere outside without a lot of people around, which right now isn't that hard to do.
Yep.
And sit down and start focusing on your breath for a while. Now, I'm no meditation guru or anything like that. I believe in it. I think it's a great practice. But just sit down, close your eyes, and listen to your breathing for a while. And just get right into your breathing, get centered on that, and start to write down, bring a notepad and pen, start to write down what's going on, start journaling it, getting it out, and then start asking those questions about what can you do differently, and start seeing what the answers come to you. It's as simple as that. I mean, everyone has the capacity for this. Make sure you include, if you've stopped your exercise, include any form of exercise. It doesn't matter how light, every single day. That'll start to give you the mental clarity better than anything. There's lots of free yoga online. Most people can do some sort of yoga, whatever it is. That stuff I highly recommend, because that will start to help you to think better. If we're not working this stuff out, it's like grief. It's a lot like grief and trauma. If you have to get to a point where you can start moving the body to pump out that acid feeling in your body. Same sort of thing. Use the same approach.
Yeah.
Get active, really. That's probably the first major step. But look into some sort of breathing practice. There's heaps of stuff online. We're spoiled with resources today.
Yeah. Anything else apart from exercise and breathing practice and taking notes and reflecting? Because because the issue for a lot of people in business is that they lack the time. The people say that I don't have enough time. So
Okay, I love that. That's one of my favorite comments. How much sleep do you get a night? Right now, they're probably up all night worrying, but the time devoted to rest. One of the best, one of my favorite guys that I've been on his podcast as well, mate of mine. He goes, show me your schedule, and I'll show you what your priorities are. So look, write down your daily schedule, even if it's not a planned schedule, just what happens, and start looking at all of the time you spend, and be honest with everything that you've got, and start to look at that and start to set priorities. Often for me, I like to do it early. So exercise is a no-brainer, it's a non-negotiable. So that's, 5:30, 6 every morning I'm out doing it. Set your priorities, and right now you need to prioritize getting your mind in the right space. Okay. There's a bunch of resources I can recommend, and I'll send that through if you like. But also, my Facebook group, it's a men's mental health Facebook group. I highly recommend people come along and check it out.
Well, why don't you, whilst we're on that, because we're probably coming to the end of this podcast, but why don't you tell people exactly how they can find you?
Okay, ways to find me online. Men's Mental Health Transformation is the name of my Facebook group. It's, as the name suggests, heaps of free resources there. I'm constantly updating the resources. Just if you do me a favor, if you're going to have a crack at joining, just answer the questions before you come in, but it's not mandatory. Also, askcraigball.com is my website for what I do in the speaking space. You can find me under the same handle on LinkedIn for the other things that I do, but also the big one, changeseminars.com also. So yeah, check those out. I'm also Craig Ball on obviously on Facebook, and Craig Ball men's mental health speaker on Facebook as well.
Craig, I've got to say that, we could spend hours talking about your field of study and how you've applied it with people and clients, but we've got to wrap up now. So I wanted to thank you for your taking the time out to share with our viewers and our listeners. And mate, I really found it fascinating.
Thanks heaps, George. Oh, one thing I forgot, an email if you want to get in touch with me. It's
yeah, sure.
info@changeseminars.com. That's how you'll find me as well. Thanks heaps, George. And look, I really sincerely hope that everybody out there is doing their best. I hope some of the things I've shared today, even if you take one thing away, there's people out there who care. And it's important that we don't, nobody falls down the dark holes of psychological unwellness, or, whatever that is.
Mate, they're good words for people. Thanks, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. Always a pleasure, mate.
Take care.
You too.